Can you speak briefly to the civil society in Turkey right now, particularly after the murder of Hrant Dink? There was an upsurge of rage as well as grief in Turkey, and there was kind of an ephemeral activism. How can this activism be sustained in Turkey, including some, if you can kind of speak to the space created for academics and scholars to pursue this kind of work? And also your personal experience, how does this make your work easier or harder? How has this personally affected you?
What do you think about Dr. Perinçek's case in Switzerland? Do you think he had a fair trial?
Banning denial, if the denial is defined in a very broader sense, not whether you use the term or not, in a broader sense, it can be put under punishment. This is like whether you put the torture as a punishment sort or not. This is the new phase that we have, and it must be discussed on that point very seriously. And as I said, my general point at this point, especially from the Turkish perspective, I'm against any ban of or punishment against the denial of Armenian genocide. This is Millet-i Sadıka became a milleti problem. Why the trusted nation became a problem nation. This is the question, the first question. The Ottoman authorities used this term for the Armenians because mid of 19th century, the Ottoman authorities were dealing with the problems of Serbia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Greece, and so on, and there were no Armenian reform movement. And so they considered the Armenians as good people, and they replaced the Armenians also with the Greeks or Bulgarians in the Ottoman administration. Beginning of 1880s, Armenians developed a reform movement. They had two basic demands. It's very important to understand today also. What was to understand the Kurdish question and other questions? So, Armenians were asking two things. One is equality, and according to Islamic law, it was not possible. Ottoman authorities were rejecting, declining any demand towards equality, end of 19th centuries. There are court cases we know that, for example, Armenian witnesses were not taken into account because they were Christian. Equality was the basic demand, and the second demand was the land. They demanded their land back. And the origin of this land question goes back in the medieval time, because Kurds in that region were the nomadic, and Armenians were mostly sitting in the cities and sedentaries in the villages, and the Kurds were regularly attacking these villages. And it was a normal social problem in 17th, 18th century. In 19th century, it became a national problem because the groups they started to define themselves with their national identity. It is very interesting. First time when the Armenian problem defined in international diplomacy, it was not defined as a problem between Ottoman authorities and the Armenian subjects. It is defined as a problem between Kurds and the Armenians, and the foreign powers asked the Ottoman authorities to take the measures to prevent the attacks of Kurds against Armenians. So it never stopped, and these two problems made Armenian reform issue as Kurdish reform issue today as a basic problem. And if you consider reform or equality, land reform, social reforms as a problem, then the violence is a normal occurrence of it. So this is my answer to that question. What is the civil society attitude of and our problems today? Hrant Dink's funeral was really unexpected. nobody expected that 100,000 people, more than 100,000, were coming on the street. It was a shock for those who assassinated Hrant. The people came out from their caves. For me, there are different explanations of it. How we can explain this coming, pouring of people on the Istanbul streets. There were no organization behind it. My explanation is it was an apology from Hrant. Because Hrant was a public figure in Turkey. Almost every week he was on the television. He was very influential. I know stories from him and from his friend who were together with him. He was my friend. That he, for example, when he gave a speech in certain meetings, in Antalya, they told me in history, or in Trabzon, these are two examples, the students came, nationalists, to attack him, organized, sitting there, and Hrant spoke. After his speech, they were all crying. He was very influential in his speech and positions. I think it was an apology of people. He was a journalist also. You have to keep in mind that aspect. The assassination of journalists in Turkey is a tradition. And after each assassination, there were always huge demonstrations in Turkey. Uğur Mumcu, Ahmet Taner Kışlalı, and so on. And so this was the reason why all newspapers, for example, take over this as their own cases. The important question that I don't have any answer is, what is going to happen from these protests? Because it was not an organized act, there was no political organization behind it. The important question is whether or not these people will come up and develop a movement which argue that it is not a problem in Turkey, or it should not be a problem in Turkey, being Armenian, being Kurds, or being somebody else. The ethnic, cultural plurality of the society is not a problem, is something good and positive for Turkey. We don't know yet. Personally, Hrant's assassination had a very negative effect on individuals like myself. There are now around 10 people under police protection in Istanbul. Journalists, scholars, they can only go outside the street because of the police protection, only with the police protection. And it's important to know they cut the maybe individuals who organized this crime, who did assassinate Hrant, but they still didn't find or couldn't find, or they don't want to find the mastermind behind it. And this is a very scary development in Turkey, and there are enough reasons to be scary. But there are other developments also. I was charged, there was a criminal investigation against me from 301. I learned yesterday from my lawyer that the case against me were dropped by the public prosecutor. So it was a clear case. If any other public prosecutor doesn't follow this investigation against me, it will say that, according to this decision, it is not a crime to use the term genocide in Turkey. Because it was the first in my case. In other cases, other scholars or individuals were always trying to go around that issue. Elif Shafak, she said that it was not me, it was my character in Roman, my novel. And I went to public prosecutor and said, yes, it is me, it is what I believe, and this is what I want to say, this is my freedom of speech. If you want to charge me from that, please do it. This is what I believe. And now they dropped the case. It could be a positive sign in Turkey that the usage of the term genocide is not a crime. But how this movement will develop, we really don't know.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank the audience. It was a very good conversation. Thank you all for coming.